My name is Martin Daniels, and I'd like to welcome you to our financial aid webinar for the spring semester of 2020. We're glad to have you with us this evening, and certainly we look forward to having you and your family back on campus again very soon. We have a set presentation to walk through that'll take maybe 30 to 40 minutes or so. We will have a couple places where we'll pause to answer some of the more common questions that are coming through. And here in a short while, we'll go over some of the ground rules in terms of submitting questions using the chat and the question box feature. For the topics we're going to talk about, here we go right here on this slide. One of the things we want to emphasize is that right now our customer service platform is taking place in a remote setting. We're all on work from home in the financial aid office at this time. So when you send things, please send them by electronic means, and make sure that you are utilizing the document drop from our website. That is a very convenient tool to use. We'll have some refreshers on the types of aid that we offer, talk a little bit about outside scholarships and how they impact aid, and then address changes to family circumstances. Also, one thing that's different if you happen to attend last event is that after the presentation, we're going to stick around for a while and answer some of the other questions that have come through. So we should have a good opportunity to address your questions both through the presentation and through the question feature that's available on your website. As I mentioned, my name is Martin Daniels, and I'm the director for the Financial Aid Office. I've been with Rensselaer for about 3 years, and it's a wonderful place. Joining as the co-host today is Christopher Oakley, our associate director, and he will be helping with the question and answer. Also, and their names are not here, we do have Stacy Antonelli, one of our assistant directors, will be joining to help with the question and answer session, as well as representatives from the admissions office who can help us with the questions that might be more for admissions rather than financial aid. But right now, I'd just like to turn the microphone over to Chris for just a couple minutes to talk about the program format and to go over a couple more highlights of our remote customer service.
Thanks, Marty. Like Marty said, my name is Chris Oakley. I am our Associate Director here at Rensselaer. And I wanted to go over just some kind of basic housekeeping notes for you as we kind of get into the program for tonight. So the first thing, and it kind of feeds into that center section there, is that everything tonight, as you're seeing already, will be audio only. And what we'll basically do is kind of at a couple of points in the middle, we will stop, and our other co-hosts, Stacy and Priscilla, will read some questions off to Marty and kind of have him answer them for the group. You'll see also within the window here, you have the option to ask questions through the chat feature within the webinar here. I'd absolutely encourage you to take advantage of that as well. What I'll be doing as Marty presents and as Priscilla and Stacy kind of pull questions from there, I'll take some questions from the chat box as well and respond to them, and they'll show up right in the chat for everyone to see from there. So a couple of things with that, the chat and the questions are moderated, meaning that we need to, I'll basically be approving the questions that come through. So, you know, I'll go through and kind of take as many as I can as we work through the program. So I just ask that you be patient with us as we try to kind of answer as many questions as possible. You can also be assured that if you submit the question, we'll get it on our side. So, you know, you don't have to go through and complete the same question multiple times, which we kind of had the last time around for our program. So, you know, just kind of be conscious of that. And basically, you know, like Marty just alluded to a minute ago, when we wrap up the program here today, we will have some time where we'll kind of hang out in the chat and answer any kind of last minute questions that trickle through. So we may not get to every single person, but we'll certainly do our best to answer every question that we can throughout the course of the program here. And then that kind of leads down into the bottom section here, just about the customer service. Again, Marty kind of touched on this a little bit, but we are working remotely because of the current public health crisis that's happening now. We have access to basically everything that we need to be able to process aid and work with families to the full extent, but we are just not in the office. So, we prefer that you reach out by email if you have questions. We have a document upload tool on our website that you can submit documents to that we absolutely encourage you to use. And we can even set up phone meetings if families are interested in that. But we kind of would prefer that you go through the process of maybe emailing into us first, so we can kind of touch base that way, and then decide the best course of action after that. So we will, we'll work, as best as we can, kind of given the circumstances, and kind of work to assist as many families as possible. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Marty, and then I will hop into the chat and start answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Christopher. I appreciate your help with this technology very much. One of the things that we are focusing on is, of course, our awarding of incoming students. And a real quick note also about the session is that we are not really facilitating individual student account level questions for the session. But please, one common theme is that if you have already filed your FAFSA and you've also filed the CSS profile, but you have not yet received an award offer, that is a good opportunity for you to send us an email with your student's Rensselaer ID number, so we can check the account and see if there's anything that we still need to help resolve. A good example is that because we require both forms, sometimes families will answer the same questions differently. And so we typically work through the bulk of our awards first, and then there are some that are follow-up questions that we have for the family before moving forward. So again, if it sees that if it feels to you like you should have received your award by now, please do let us know so we can check the student's account more closely. For electronic communications, one of the key aspects of a student going to college is that they become responsible for the financial relationship while they're at the campus. And so for Rensselaer and most other colleges now, we have what we're calling a student privacy authorization form. And basically that's an opportunity for the student to let us know who we have their permission to speak to in detail about their accounts. A little bit later on, I'll show a couple things from our website, and I'll be sure to highlight that form and where it's located in our forms section. Additionally, the students will have access to what we call our SIS, or Student Information System. That's essentially a student view into their accounts with the college. They can see what type of documents they might still need to submit to financial aid, and they might also have a chance to check their billing account. And so keep in mind that as your student transitions to campus, the privacy considerations are for all offices. And so make sure that your student is giving the authorization to the parents to be helpful if that's what is going to be best for your family. The last bullet item there is just simply the reminder that email is our official communication method for students. And so a common theme is that we'll notify the student, and it indicates to check their SIS account to see an updated document requirement from the financial aid office. So students should be checking SIS and also their email accounts regularly. That's the policy for all the administrative offices on campus. For upcoming events, simply as you progress through and make your deposit and plan for orientation activities, you'll want to make sure that your student has reviewed and accepted their awards in SIS. Also, the required document notifications for new families begin in May. So if you filed your FAFSA and were selected for the federal income verification process, we have gone through a review to see whether or not we're comfortable processing the award without getting perhaps tax forms and things like that. Please do not send us tax forms if we're not requesting them from you. Understand that we do try to focus those requests on families that have been selected by the Department of Education for those reviews. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, if there's a significant difference in the profile versus the FAFSA data, we may request forms in those situations as well. Also, there will be additional documents that you'll need to file for the Federal Student Loan Program and the Federal Work-Study Program if your student has those awards and chooses to participate. Again, additional documents and different instructions will be provided to you over the summer. A couple quick highlights are that for the loan programs, the student needs to do a master promissory note and entrance counseling consumer information session. Those are basically done on the studentaid.gov website. And so that's a federal process, and both activities have to be done before we can disperse the loan to the student. For the Federal Work-Study Program, we have a separate application that is typically due on August 1st each year. And the students, based on the demand for the jobs, please be sure that your student submits the application in a timely manner so we can place them as soon as possible after the start of the term. The next couple slides are more or less reminders. I know some of you may have heard our presentations on campus or other financial aid information sessions you've gone to, but just simply a reminder that scholarships are based on academic merit or special skills. For example, our Rensselaer Medal Scholarship is our premier academic scholarship. Many students receive our Rensselaer Leadership Award as our most common merit scholarship. And for the merit awards, we can certainly notify the student of that at the time they're accepted, regardless of their FAFSA and profile status. For the grants, which are also free awards that do not need to be repaid, that's where we require the FAFSA and the CSS profile for the family to be considered for all the resources we have available. And a keynote there is that if you had received a merit-only award letter at acceptance, and perhaps you have not yet filed your profile, sometimes that happens, keep in mind that we're awarding students on a rolling basis at this time. And so once we see that both documents are received, we will go ahead and complete the award for the student. Loan programs, of course, are funds that are borrowed by the student or parent and need to be repaid after typically the end of enrollment. One thing to keep in mind is that if you're able to make interest payments on the parent loan or an unsubsidized direct loan during enrollment, that will lessen the long-term cost of financing that loan. But certainly loans are not what you're coming to college for, but they do represent a mechanism to help fund the cost of education. For student employment, the federal work-study program is need-based. That's why the FAFSA is required to participate, and those awards are part of the financial aid notifications that we provide from the Office of Financial Aid. We also are responsible for placing the students into jobs on campus. Typically, our work-study jobs are administrative support, for example, helping with filing or customer service for an academic department, doing scanning, different things like that in the administrative offices. However, keep in mind also that the work-study program only represents about 1/3 of the total jobs available to our students on campus. For the non-work-study positions, those are handled through the Career Center, and they have a website called JobLink where students can enter their information and find jobs that are available to students on campus. In terms of the different types of notification, that's what this slide speaks to a little bit more. As I mentioned, merit scholarships, we can notify students upon acceptance, and there's no renewal forms to file into future years. One of the things I really like about Rensselaer is that we do not attach a significant grade attainment expectation to getting the merit awards renewed. Rensselaer is a challenging college, and congratulations to all your families for your student being accepted. We do not need them to come and then feel like they have to sustain a 3.5 or a 3.2 or something like that, just simply to have their merit award renewed. As long as the student is welcome to come back to the campus academically, then we will renew their merit scholarship for up to 8 semesters of undergraduate enrollment. For the need-based grants and loans and work, those require the profile and the FAFSA for the very first year only. For the returning years, we only require the FAFSA in order to renew the federal aid. And in most cases, the FAFSA allows us to renew the total gift aid for the student from one year to the next. And so that's why we do not need the profile beyond that very first year. The next 2 slides that I'll talk about are important in terms of starting to have a long-term view of the students' enrollment at Rensselaer. This slide talks about 2 programs that I'm a really big fan of. There's the ARCH program and also our co-terminal programs. The ARCH program really encourages students to get out and have career-related experiences or do a self-study or maybe a study abroad program within their 4 years of undergraduate enrollment. So our job in the financial aid office is to align the awards to the time when the student is going to be on campus taking classes at Rensselaer. And during the ARCH year, even though the student would be on campus for the summer, between their sophomore and junior year, just keep in mind that they're only going to be on campus again for one of the remaining 2 terms of that academic year. So freshman year, fall, spring, pretty typical expectation. Sophomore year, same thing, fall, spring, the awards all line up just to those 2 terms. And then for the arch year, we award 1 term over the summer, and then based on the student's choice or academic program, we align their second term of aid to the second term when they are going to be on campus. And so it's not an additional cost to the family to participate in the arch. It's just simply that the sequencing of the enrollment and the aid is a little bit different during that year. There are very few situations where a student is on campus for the 3 consecutive terms of enrollment, only for the arch year. The coterminal programs, I think, are a great deal when you're looking at wanting to attain a master's degree. Simply stated, the undergraduate gift aid from Rensselaer carries on into the additional year that's required for the coterminal programs. So not only is it getting essentially a 4-year degree and a 2-year degree in just 5 years instead of 6, the student does not have to compete against other students for any gift aid or scholarships because they know the funding they have from Rensselaer is going to continue into that graduate year. Another good feature is that if the student was eligible for the federal Pell Grant program, we try to make up some of the funds that the student would lose because they're becoming a graduate student. Another good thing that the parents on the webinar might appreciate is that once your student is able to apply to school as a graduate student, then the parent information is no longer required on the FAFSA. The mixed news for the student there is that then the student loan eligibility also goes up, and so they become responsible for covering the majority of the costs on their own, unless, of course, they're helping take out the trash and doing a lot of work over the summers in between. So anyhow, 2 great programs to help the students get ready for their career, and I encourage your students to explore both of those while they're with us at Rensselaer. This slide talks about our accelerated programs that are available through Rensselaer and also in partnership with other campuses. For our accelerated law and medical programs, those are in partnership, for example, with the Albany Medical College and also Harvard for the law students. And so, again, really strong partnerships are part of the Rensselaer tradition, and those carry forward into these programs as well. Keep in mind, however, that for these programs, unlike the coterminal, then we are, the student is receiving Rensselaer aid when they're at Rensselaer, and then they're applying to the other campus for financial aid for the time that they're at their other campus. The other section here for the on-campus accelerated programs are not coterminal. They're combined PhD programs or bachelor's and MBA programs, and the funding shifts to the graduate level once the bachelor is completed, but the funding is determined by our graduate office because these programs would not technically be the coterminal programs. One thing that you may see about Rensselaer as a strength is how we do a great job of communicating the opportunities for the students. And from the time they come to campus, they'll have exposure to ask questions and find out more about these great combined programs as well. So with that said, we've kind of come up to our first opportunity to take a pause and have a look at some of the questions that might be coming in. So Priscilla or Stacy, what type of questions are you seeing that we could address for the audience?
I see several questions with appeals, and I have one that is, what is the proper way to go about a financial aid appeal?
Okay, and that is a great question, and we will talk about that in detail after covering a couple more slides after this question break. Certainly, we do get requests for additional funding reviews, and so let's take a check on that one for now, and we'll talk about that in great detail here in just a few minutes.
Okay. Next question is there a special form that can be submitted if a sibling is now also enrolled in another university to be considered for financial aid?
Okay, thank you, Stacy. That's a good question as well. And keep in mind that as your students go through college and you have multiple students, that is going to be reflected in the FAFSA information that the colleges receive. And so with the way that the question was addressed, I would assume that the student might be starting at Rensselaer and they would be the only student in college. And so that would be reflected on the FAFSA, and the family contribution index would be based on the view of one student in college. We do not provide automatic adjustments between the years. So as you file the FAFSA, and if the second student goes to college, then you would need to contact us. And if that's causing a financial need for a review, certainly that can be one rationale that's described to us. However, do keep in mind that our focus is on trying to provide the award to the student on their way in. We may not be able to meet every expectation that's described to us. And simply speaking, for this topic, when a family has one in college and then they end up with two, the family contribution is generally split between the two students. And then we review, and we have policies that help us with increases between the years. So that is a good rationale for a review request. Stacy, what else?
Is everyone who receives work study in their financial aid package guaranteed a job, or is it based on who fills out the application first?
That is a real good question, and after this, we'll move on to the next slide and get back into the presentation. For the work study positions, it's very important that the student submit their application in a timely manner. Generally speaking, we do not have any issues spending our work study dollars, but at the same time, once we place students starting in August and through the first of the year, it's pretty difficult to be added to that roster after the school year starts. This year, we had a good year with the program, and after the start of the year, we were able to bring some additional students off of the wait list, and we've had over 600 students working this year through the work study program. The jobs are not necessarily guaranteed, but the student is able to let us know what type of work they would like to do, and we do our best to try to place them into a job that matches their interest. I think a good reminder here is that the federal work study program is a financial aid program. It's not the same type of connections to research or working with faculty that might be available through the non-work study occupations. But this year, one thing I can say for sure that addresses this is that every student that filed the application in a timely manner was working by the end of September. Okay, so only the students that filed the application late had to wait before they started to work. And even those students, we were able to get most of them working before the end of the fall semester. And work study is also different in that the student earns the money as they work the hours. It's not an automatic award. So file on time, get a good placement, and make sure your students work in the hours. And that's how to maximize that award program at the family level. All right, I'll move on to the next couple of slides, which address outside scholarships and the different types of resources that families might have exposure to outside of the traditional financial aid programs. These two focus on sort of the military program environment. Rensselaer is a yellow ribbon participating college, and that means that in situations where the service person has 100% of their benefit eligibility, then Rensselaer plus the VA programs will cover the full tuition, fees, and room and board for those students. One of the things that we get questions about sometimes is, oh, hey, I got my leadership scholarship and now I'm 100% yellow ribbon. Can I get the scholarship on top of the free tuition from everything else? And the answer basically is no. So the combination of the veteran benefits plus RPI gifts do not exceed the total of tuition and fees and room and board. And for families that have VA eligibility that are not yellow ribbon associated, it's that same concept. We review, those students get great awards, but the combination of those awards do not exceed our direct cost. Additionally, for both veteran benefits and bridging a little bit into the ROTC programs, keep in mind that students that participate in these programs still retain their full federal aid eligibility based on their FAFSA status. So they would get the Pell Grant if eligible. They could still do a work study job. They could still have a student loan where the interest is paid by the government during enrollment. And so those are great benefits that come with both the VA program and ROTC. For a little bit more on ROTC, we have all three branches that have programs on our campus, and most of the awards are 3-year awards. So chances are, if your student has not engaged with ROTC at this time, then if they were interested, they could come to campus, they could learn about the program and meet some of the participants, and then if they compete and receive an award, they might have that same platform of tuition fees, room and board covered in the combination between ROTC and RPI funds. A couple differences between the branches are that Army and Navy provide the full tuition. And so we know that tuition fees, room and board would be covered in the combination. But for Air Force, they only provide a partial award. This most recent year, it was $18,000. And so the Air Force ROTC students end up with a little bit of a mix compared to the others, but they're still fantastic awards for great students, and they're out there trying to do great things for our country. So if your students are interested in ROTC, I would encourage them to check that out. And the last time we had a conversation with the leadership on campus from those offices, they said that we could have a very large increase in our ROTC participation, and the federal offices they report to would be happy to have more participants from schools such as RPI. The next slide might be a little bit more common for our folks on the call, in that we're talking more about community-based scholarships. For example, the high schools might be looking at giving out awards at the end of the year that have scholarships from local donors. There's service organizations like Kiwanis, Knights of Columbus, et cetera, that you might want to check into if your family participate. Same thing with parents, employers, and religious organizations. It's never a bad question to check in and see if they have funds, if it's a group that your family is associated with. For Rensselaer, we apply those awards to meeting the FAFSA need first. And what that means is that the last thing we're looking to do would be reduce Rensselaer need-based grant because of an outside scholarship. Because of federal requirements, there are situations where a student might have their work award reduced, or they might lose the eligibility for interest subsidy on their student loan because of these awards. But we sort of peel those awards back first, and then only in situations where it's more or less a super award where we get into a situation where we would look at reducing Rensselaer grant. And keep in mind, if that happens, which is rare, it's a situation where the student has gift aid that's meeting and exceeding their full demonstrated FAFSA need. And generally speaking, we have plenty of students with unmet financial need, and we would like an opportunity to direct some of those dollars elsewhere in those kinds of situations. What I like to say on this slide, of course, is please go out and secure your super fund type of award level, and then we can talk about it. Otherwise, most students are bringing in awards that total $5,000 or less, and in pretty much every one of those situations, we're only adjusting loan and work, and we're not adjusting need-based grant. The second part is just kind of a reminder that if you have not started looking for these types of awards yet, it's never too late. And also keep in mind that you should not feel as though you have to pay to receive information about these types of scholarships. The two websites there, finaid.org, fastweb.com, those are free search engines. The student enters demographic and academic interest information, and they're provided with a list of organizations that might have programs that match. One of the things that I've seen over my many years in financial aid is that some of the services that a family pays for, all they're doing is paying for someone else to go to these two websites, and they're getting the same exact list no matter who's doing it. And so if you have questions, give us a call. We will try to help out. And then also keep in mind that our website does have descriptions of the different government programs, and as we mentioned earlier, a document upload. And so before I take a kind of a pause for another set of questions, I do want to share my screen here for just a minute so that I can show a couple of the things that we have talked about, and then we will go to the questions. So I'll click share screen, and then here in a few seconds, I'll be right back. Okay, at this time you should be looking at the Rensselaer website homepage. And one of the things that also is great about Rensselaer is that we have very smart people who are here, in addition to the very smart students that are coming up in the next generation behind the folks that are here. And related to the COVID-19 response, I'm happy to see that we're involved with helping with some of the research towards testing, and also with the computer power to help track this and help get things under control. So if you want to see how Rensselaer is helping out, right from the homepage, you can click on this information and see what all we're doing to help out. What I wanted to highlight for the session, though, is that the financial aid website is under the admissions header, and then you can see over to the right, you would click on financial aid. The very first page that you see has the different options for new students with a launch here, but that takes you to a page that has our video tools that talk about financial aid at the different stages of the application process. Right now, hopefully you're through the troublesome 10, and then session 4 might be one that you would want to check out after the call, or maybe a little bit later in the spring. It talks about the types of activities that you participate in between now and when your student begins enrollment, transition to the billing environment, and so on. One of the things I wanted to focus on, though, is over here in the right navigation section in this menu, you'll see our forms section. When you go to the forms section, the first thing on there is our release of information authorization that I mentioned earlier when talking about student privacy. Another thing that associates with the outside scholarships is our outside scholarship report form. I would encourage you, if your student is expecting to receive outside awards, to go ahead and complete that and send it in to us. We have to make the adjustments based on the receipt of these, no matter when we find out. And so it's better for us to know over the summer and adjust accounts before the year starts, rather than having the funds come to the bursar office and then we're making adjustments after the start of the year. And then lastly, I'll point out before going to our question time frame that here is the form to report a change in family circumstances. I'll click it open so you get a little bit of a preview before we talk about this as a presentation topic. The first page is mainly identifying the student, giving you a little bit on the environment factors around the reviews, also indicating who might be experiencing a loss of income, which are the FAFSA parents, are they working, so on down the line. And then very important is this bottom section that talks about the different types of documents that are needed to support the statements that you're making. And so provide what's reasonably available. If we need more, we will ask you for more. So when you're looking at using this form, understand that part of what you're asking is, hey, I filled out the FAFSA, I filled out the profile, but there's a disconnect between those results and the way things are now for our family. Typically, that's going to focus on a loss of income, but it might also be a situation where there's medical expenses not being covered by insurance. So the second page is designed so that you would provide your 2019 tax year information, and then the best estimate you have available of your 2020 tax year information. And this allows us to build essentially a comparison to the adjusted gross income and total untaxed income being received by the family. And we can do a direct comparison to the FAFSA data and make decisions around whether or not the student's aid eligibility changes. And keep in mind that there are different rules that we need to follow for the federal programs. And then there are the rules that we need to follow for the Rensselaer programs. And so please describe your situation, and we will try to be as helpful as we're able to within our policies and funding limits for all students. We also understand that it's not always a loss of income. There might be a different situation that's involved, such as medical expenses not covered by insurance or natural disaster related items as well. And so you can report those in terms of providing us more or less a number story so we can consider the impact against the FAFSA information. And one thing, and this is the last thing I'll do before we go to the questions, is that For 2020, for example, we know that we're just only at the end of the first 3 months. We know there's a lot of going on in the economy right now, and that we don't know exactly what some of the financial stimulus money means for individual families. And so if the request is specific to a recent loss of income, understand that we'll do the best we can to review based on the information that's available now. But we might also ask to receive updates from your family later in the year to either find out that a loss of income is still taking place, or, for example, if the family has been covered by 100% of pay through unemployment, then there's not the same type of loss of income. And so it'll be an interesting year, and certainly this is the form that communicates most of those details to our office. And so I'll switch back to the regular screen, and after a couple of seconds, we'll go to the questions again. Okay, Stacy or Priscilla, what questions would you like us to cover for the group?
Okay, Marty, I have a couple questions related to Workstudy. Some people have questioned whether or not they have to receive it in their financial aid package to be eligible, and what is the average number of hours a student works in a Workstudy job?
Those are both great questions. I will try to remember them both. In terms of the federal Workstudy program that's based on financial need and includes the placement into jobs through the financial aid office, those do have to be presented on the student's award letter. We have limited funds available, even though this year we'll pay out close to $1 million in wages. Certainly there's a greater demand for wages than $1 million. So we have to limit the awarding to families with a higher financial need as a priority. And if the award for federal Workstudy is not on the award letter, that's an indication that the student would want to look at the JobLink website from the Career Center for other on-campus employment opportunities. The other on-campus opportunities will not show on the award letter. Only the federal Workstudy eligibility will show on the award letter. Typically, the awards that we provide as kind of a standard would be for a maximum earning for the year of $2,000. That's translating, even in the updated minimum wage environment, to be around 7 to 8 hours a week. Certainly, it's typically less than 10. We really discourage students from working more than 10 hours a week, and certainly for human resource factors, we do not want them working over 20 hours a week. The student is here to be a student first. The work should supplement that. And if I were to look at a roster of all our Workstudy students, you would see the whole range. There are students that are placed and they work their $2,000 and no problem. The vast majority of students earn less than their full award, and we have some students that appear that they're only working like 1 or 2 hours a week, a couple times a semester. But if they're placed and that's the way it's working out for them, then certainly that's fine by us. So both of those are great questions. Thank you, Priscilla.
One little follow-up to that. A student asked how they are paid for their Workstudy. Does it get deducted from their tuition, or are they given a paycheck?
In short, the student is provided a paycheck. A little bit more detail is that we encourage students to sign up for electronic deposit or electronic funds transfer with the bursar's office. That way their Workstudy pay can be directly deposited into their bank account through the bursar's office. Also with the bursar's office, the student can sign to have their Workstudy check applied against their bill. That's not the most common option, but that is available. In most cases, the students receiving the check or getting the direct deposit, and they're using those funds for miscellaneous expenses. And a good connection that I make with this is simply that when we award financial aid, our cost of attendance is our direct cost, tuition fees, room and board, but then also there's a couple $1,000s that we plan that students are going to spend on transportation, books and supplies, miscellaneous expenses. And so those are not direct billed items, and financial aid does not pay directly against the bursar bill. And so typically the student is using their Workstudy funds for some of those other items maybe they're going to go out and get a pizza every once in a while, something like that. That's part of the student experience as well. And a work study job is a good way to have a little bit of spending money during the year. All right, Priscilla, any other questions before we go a little bit further into special conditions?
Yes. When is the payment due for the first semester?
Typically, the billing cycle begins in July. Usually it's either on July 1st, or then they'll wait till after the 4th of July, depending on the weekend dates. But typically the bill for the fall goes out at the start of July, and it's due typically by August 1st or maybe August the 8th, depending on the year and other calendar factors. So billed at the start of July, balance due at the start of August. And information on the billing cycle and monthly payment plan are available not only through the video clip that I mentioned several minutes ago now, but then also as the summer progresses, you'll start getting information directly from the bursar's office that talks about the billing environment and how to sign up for their billing services. Another thing I'll mention, because this is a great time to do it, is that keep in mind that all students are going to start out with a health insurance charge on their bill, because we require students to have health insurance when they're on campus. Families will go through an active process to waive that university insurance. Essentially, it's documenting that the family plan is sufficient to cover the student when they're on campus. Once that's received, those charges are removed. So once you get into that billing environment, keep those types of details in mind as well. And as I mentioned before, there's the bursar office uses student privacy rules as well. And so in addition to the form that provides authorization for who we can speak with, the student through the bursar website can designate what's called a payor. And a payor has the ability to go in online and look at the student's bill at any time. And so I encourage all the families to set up payor access for the parent or one person other than the student of the student's choice. And I also encourage you all to do the release of information authorization so that we can be most helpful over the phone. Maybe Priscilla, let's take one more question and then I'll get back to the regular presentation.
Okay, I'm getting some questions, and I do believe you answered this, but could you reiterate how our leadership awards are renewed all 4 years? Because some people are questioning the amount and whether or not they are the same for all 4 years.
Yes, I did talk about the renewal in terms of there's not a separate form that the student has to file to have those awards renewed. And then the additional information is that the student's award from their first year is what we look to renew for each year. So in addition to not having a grade point average that the student needs to meet to sustain the award, that is also an environment where we don't look to reduce the awards on the student based on grade performance or other factors either. The award the student receives their first year is what the family should plan to receive for each 4 years that they're enrolled at Rensselaer. Okay, and with that said, I'll go back. We have a little bit more to talk about in terms of changes of circumstances, and then we'll have a quick wrap up. And then, as I mentioned before, we will have our question and answer overtime for those that want to stick around. Certainly, this is an interesting time related to loss of income, as I mentioned, but the situations we are most able to help with are summarized there, where it's an involuntary reduction to income. Typically, it might be an employer closing due to economic considerations or a layoff or injury situation. And as I showed on the form, our form is designed to help us understand your situation in a manner that we can compare to the FAFSA data. So that's why we're asking about updated wages and is the parent working now, different things like that. And so for loss of income, please fill out the typical form. We know that there are other situations, and a couple of those are addressed on the form as well, such as the high medical expenses not paid by insurance and things like natural disaster damage to home and property. We are also aware, however, that there might be situations where the family would like to request additional funding, and it's not based on a loss of income or a natural disaster or other factors. First, I would indicate that the changes family circumstances form can help understand for the family what type of situations we work with best and the type of documentation that we need. Outside of that, we do get questions about, I am accepted at Rensselaer and I have the Rensselaer Award. My student is also interested in a different school and yet another third different school. And here are the award letters from those two schools. Please match the award that's going to be the best award for our family. I can tell you very clearly that we do not have a policy on our appeals that's based on matching the awards from other schools. Certainly that information helps us understand, and we do not want to lose students over small dollars that if we have an understanding of the expectation that's clearly stated by the family, we would rather try to work some things out as long as there's a good rationale. But an example that can come up is that your student's interested in Rensselaer is one option, but the statement is my student could live at home and go to the local state college. And so give me the cost of Rensselaer to match my student staying at home for the local state college. I would suggest that that's not a realistic expectation that we would be able to meet. And when it comes to the comparison to other awards, same thing. That's helpful information, but if the request is Ohio Northern University is giving me $20,000 more, we may not be able to meet that expectation to meet Ohio Northern's desire for your student. All colleges have different budgets as well as different enrollment goals, and so we are focused on our awards and our appeal policies and our funding limitations when it comes to managing all of the students that we work with in this manner. And certainly as the financial aid director, I do regret that we're not able to meet the full demonstrated need for our students. It's something that the college is working very hard to do the best we can with. But at the same time, if we don't know what the expectation is, we don't have any chance to meet the expectation. So although we may not be able to meet every expectation, it is reasonable that you would let us know what your family expectation is, and we can take a look and see what we might be able to do. And the last bullet on that slide, again, is something I had mentioned a little while ago as well, in that when we get the documents, we will look differently at the federal program rules as well as the Rensselaer rules. Not all changes can result in a federal change, but it might be able to result in a Rensselaer change, and vice versa. So we have a very active appeals environment. Again, please submit a good set of documents, and we'll see if we're able to meet the expectation your family may have. And with that said, this will just be a little bit of a wrap up before we go to the question and answer overtime. And first and foremost, I want to thank you all for joining us today. It's unfortunate we're not able to be together in person. Keep in mind that we will have the accepted student event in more or less a cyber environment this coming weekend. It'll be a little bit limited, and so that's part of the reason we're doing these financial aid webinars weekly for the next several weeks. And so keep in mind that the future sessions will be similar but not exactly the same. We'll get to a point where the appeal questions are a little bit lesser, and maybe we talk a little bit more about transition to the billing environment. And along the way, we will give additional business insights and let you know where we're at in our process. And a key reminder again for today's session is that if you've done the FAFSA and you've done the profile and you know those things are in and your student hasn't received their award yet, it is very reasonable that you would send us an email with the student ID and let us check the account and see if there's anything that we still need from your family before we can complete that award. So with that said,